Welcome to the Virtual College Fair CTCL Virtual Days. This session is Acing the Interview. Thank you for joining us. A few housekeeping announcements before we get started. You can use the Q&A button on your screen to type your questions to our presenters at any time. Your camera and microphone are off, so the panelists cannot see or hear you. This is also just one of the many sessions happening, so be sure to sign up for additional sessions. This presentation is also being recorded and will be available within about a week at the same website where you registered. At this time, I'd like to turn it over to our presenter, Tim Ho, who will be providing some great information.
All right, thank you, Annabelle. I really appreciate it. Hello, everybody. My name is Tim Howe. I'm an assistant dean of admission at Reed College. I use he, him pronouns. And I'm really excited to be here today to talk about the concept of acing the interview. The 30-second version of this is that it's hard to ace an interview. It's hard to flunk an interview because we want you to go into this feeling like it's a conversation, not a job interview. So if you need to go now, you totally can. If you want to learn more about that, then welcome. I am going to start with a couple of slides. Let me find my screen here. The way this is going to go is I'm going to go through a couple of different slides, a couple of different pieces of information, and then we will have a pretty extensive time for some Q&A at the end. This is all to say that if you want to, answer questions or ask questions throughout, you're more than welcome to. But there will be a great time right at the end for you to answer or ask any questions that you have. So feel free to use that Q&A throughout. And I'm just making sure that my screen is up. Wonderful. Awesome. So let's start here. This is one of my favorite quotes from actually one of our student interns, and it's just to get you in the right mindset of what an interview is for, okay? So Annika says, interviews are not a test, and there are no right answers. Think of them as an opportunity to connect with the people reading your application and share/emphasize what you think is important about yourself. This is important. We're going into this interview thinking about the ways in which you are bringing up your personality, filling in the gaps that don't fit very nicely into an application, and it's a chance for you to connect with people personally at the college. If you're wondering what that strange lump is on the left, that is the Doyle owl, which is a relic of Reed's history, which I can talk about much more at a later date if you want to set up a meeting with me. Okay, so when we are going into the interview, we should ask, what is the point of this? Why are we interviewing? What is the value that comes from an interview? And there's a lot of different questions to that, or answers to that. This is a pretty comprehensive look right here. Interviews allow prospective students to highlight your interests in the institution, as well as your qualifications for attending, while adding new information that we can't easily pick up from an application. So some of this I already said. When you are going through your application, you're going to have a chance to fill in the different classes that you've taken. You're going to have a chance to write about all the different activities that you've done. You're going to have a chance to write an essay about, something in your life that is either life-changing or is a good representation of who you are. And those are all things that by the time you have submitted your application, you don't have a lot of say over the narrative in those. Your grades are almost, time's up almost on those. Your activities list, well, it's probably nearing the end of what you can actually put in there. An interview is a place where you can really hold the reins to the narrative that you want to bring forward to your institutions. So think of it as a chance to have a little bit more autonomy when it comes to how you are representing yourself. There's a lot of, so when you come into an interview, don't tell me just a list of all the different activities and grades that you've gotten over the years, because when I'm going through the application, I'm going to look at your interview write-up, but right before I look at that interview write-up, what am I going to see? Your activities list, and I'm going to see your grades. So don't reiterate information that might already be on your application. Instead, think about how you are going to contextualize that information. If you are an avid birder and you have, you started a birding club at your school, think about how that has changed the culture and the community that you have fostered. Think about the reasons why you love birding. That's the stuff that's really hard for me to read in an application and is really easy for me to pick up when we're interviewing. In other words, my job is to find as many different ways to brag about you as possible. You're going to hear this a lot throughout the college application process, that colleges take a holistic approach to the application. If you haven't heard that yet, then listen for it now and you'll be like, yeah, Tim told me that. Okay. But it's true. What it really means is we're looking for as many different shades and lenses of who you are as a whole person as possible, so that I can take all of that information and brag about you in front of the other counselors. And the interview is where I'm going to get that information about what your personality is like, what it's like to be in a room with you. Okay? So, what kind of information are we looking for when it comes to the interview? Again, I want to make sure that this is clear. Hopefully this is not just read specific information. What I'm trying to have you walk away with is some skills that will cross over to many different interviews that you go to. That said, I've never been a counselor anywhere else, so this is the lens through which I will be seeing your interviews, okay? So take and leave what you can here. But ultimately, most interviews will be looking for three main things: personality, your personal mission, and additional information. When it comes to personality, it's a lot of what I already said. We're looking for the things that don't fill in nicely in an activities list or within, a transcript. What I'm looking for when I'm sitting down with a student is ways to veer off from my original questions. So if we're having a great talk about existentialism and like a class that you've taken on existentialism, then maybe I'm going to start talking about, start asking about different books you've read on the matter. And if there's something that we can connect on, then we're going to go down that road. I'm looking for the ways in which I'm going to get you excited about something, because then I'll be able to write about that very cleanly and brag about the fact that, oh my gosh, this student loves the idea of existentialism and has read all of McCarthy's work and continues this conversation with his existentialist club after school, and this is the ways in which they've grown over the years based on like the certain teacher that they had. So think about the narratives that you want to bring forward. Okay, let me see here. I'm gonna keep going. I see a question in there, but it's hard to do screen share and questions at the same time. So I will get to your question, I promise. I have another quote from Annika here. Annika is what we call a bottomless well of information when it comes to the interviewing process. They said, I don't need to know anything that's on your resume unless we get to know you better through it. Your reader is already going to know you captained the basketball team. Your interviewer wants to know why you put that work in and what excites you about it, okay? So don't give me the what or the how as much as the why, because that's the part that is hard to read. So clearly, a lot has changed in the last year, and the ways in which we interview have been compressed into one or two different options. But I think that there's some value in knowing some of the different ways in which you might interact with an interviewer, depending on the time and space that you are there. So if a college is offering on-campus visits, you might choose to do an on-campus interview. On-campus interview tends to be led by a student or a counselor. And when it comes to, the difference between a counselor and a student for an interview, it's very, very minimal. Our students are incredibly well trained on how to conduct these interviews and what to write about. And they're going to produce an interview write-up that is very, very similar to a counselor's interview write-up. Okay, so don't feel like one is better than the other. Ultimately, go in with a calm mind and just ready to have a conversation with whoever's in front of you. They tend to last about 30 minutes. They might be in an office. They might be held outside. There might be a specific room for conducting interviews, sequestered away from everyone. And this is that chance for a lot of people. It's the first time you will have that one-on-one time with a college official. Now, this is the case for all three of these options, but I want to make sure that I'm putting it out there now. When you go into an interview, I don't want you to think that it is that there are right and wrong answers that you're giving, that we're grading you, that we're knocking points off of your answers, or for that matter, that this should feel like a job interview. I want you to come in with the vibe that it is essentially the kind of conversation you have sitting in front of a cafeteria, waiting to get your food, and someone who you don't quite know strikes up a conversation with you. It should be casual. It should be informational, but mainly it should be a two-way street. A good conversation is never a one-way street. It should always go both ways. And so throughout the process, unless the interviewer asks otherwise, ask questions throughout. Come prepared with some questions. That's going to help it feel more casual, and it's going to help the interviewer know exactly what to ask next when you are asking questions. So bounce ideas off of each other. The next kind of interview that you might come across is what we call a travel season interview. Travel season is kind of an insider term that counselors use, and it's typically from about early September to mid-November, depending on the school. And it's a chance for the counselor to come to your region. So each counselor is going to have a different territory that they are in charge of. I am in charge of all of Oregon except for Portland. I'm in charge of the South Bay of San Francisco up to Northern California, and then I'm in charge of Virginia. So I'm kind of all over the place, but if that's you, hello, my name is Tim. Nice to meet you. And so during a typical year, which this is anything but, they would be coming to you. You would have this interview maybe in a coffee shop or a hotel lobby or a restaurant, some very public place. Again, it's going to be about 30 minutes. You might see other students coming in, sitting down and waiting to interview. So, it might be kind of like a quicker process because depending on the interest of the institution, there might be somewhat of a line. Don't worry about that. It is the counselor's responsibility to keep everything on time. You just go in ready to talk about yourself and your interests. Here's my hot tip that I like to give folks when a counselor is in your area. If they offer you coffee, if they offer you a pastry and you're hungry or thirsty, take that coffee or that pastry. It's on the house, it's on the institution. Don't feel bad about it. If you're not hungry or not thirsty, don't worry about it. We're not gonna knock points off of you for saying no thank you. But 90% of the time I say you want a coffee, the student's like, I don't know about that. go ahead and get it. It's on the college most of the time, and if it's going to ease your nerves, I highly recommend doing that. The kind of interview that you will see the most often right now, clearly, is virtual, because we are living our lives online right now. A lot of virtual interviews will be conducted by students, counselors, perhaps alumni officials who are there, volunteering their time to get these great interview write-ups. Again, it doesn't matter who you get in these situations. The important thing is that you are being honest about who you are, so we can get a really great write-up at the end of the day. What else do I want to say about this? Now, travel season is a very specific time of year. On campus, it's going to be kind of a specific time of year depending on, when you can come visit the institution. But as far as virtual goes, one of the benefits of going online is that it's really flattened and compressed the amount of, or the times in which you can interview. Now we are essentially available for these interviews most of the time, which is great. It's a great chance to really seek additional information about the institution as well. Okay, so this is one of those places where there's going to be a lot of variance depending on the institution, depending on the counselor or the interviewer themselves and what kinds of questions they like to ask. But the main thing is, when you have an interview, the questions that they are asking are all there. They're all designed to get you chatting about something that you're interested in, or chatting about something that we think is going to be important to show the other counselors. For a lot of schools, the interview write-up that we're using is really, really helpful when we have gone through the interview or gone through the application. We say, this looks like a great student, but we just need a little bit more of a push. And so a lot of these questions are designed to give that piece of information that you're not going to find throughout the application. So things like, tell me about the toughest class you've ever taken and how you handled it. Where do you like to sit in your classroom and why? Who is your favorite teacher? Why did they make an impression? How do you like to spend your free time? What is it about Reed that specifically interests you? In what ways would you like to get involved around campus? And then this is the universal one that's going to come up at a lot of institutions, especially, here at Reed. Every counselor will ask you this question. Everyone who interviews you will ask you this. And that is there anything you would like to tell us that won't show up on your application? Because ultimately that is the thesis of why we are having this interview in the first place. So going through the 30 minutes, there's a couple things that you should know. When you meet the counselor, if it's in person, they might offer you a coffee or pastry. You'll sit down. If it's online, you might have a little bit of small talk. They might tell you a little bit about the format of the interview itself, and then they'll jump right into it. The three main categories of what they're going to be asking about are your academics, your social life, and why you are interested in the institution, okay? Sometimes those questions might feel a little job interviewy, and that is really just so they can get to the heart of the interview write-up and get a really great list of notes that they can move on and brag about you later. While you are moving through this interview, like I said before, make sure you are you're asking questions. You're making this a dialogue instead of a monologue. This is a really great chance for us to gain information about you. It's also a really great chance for you to gain information about the institution. So if someone asks what kinds of academics you're interested in, and you say, yeah, I'm interested in chemistry because I had this really fantastic teacher. who changed the way I look at the world, and really like brought in this philosophical element that I hadn't even considered within STEM courses before. It might be a great chance for you to say, what are the professors like within the chemistry department? Because then you might glean some more information as to whether this is the school for you. Remember, there's value on both sides. When you are finished with the interview, you might get a business card, you might get an email from the interviewer with some contact information. It never hurts to follow up with a thank you note or an email. Okay, when you're doing these things, let me go back a little bit. When you're interviewing or when you're researching schools, even, it behooves you to look into these different schools and think about what kinds of elements are the schools going to be evaluating. Is it simply qualifications? Is it interest? A lot of schools are going to be looking at your interest in the school and how many times you've engaged with someone. And this here, interviews are a really great way of gaining that demonstrated interest. And additionally, to follow up and say, hey, thanks for this. I really appreciate the time that you took out of your day. Depending on the institution, they might copy and paste that and say, wow, look at what this person did to take this time out of their day to follow up. I have a wall of my thank you notes over on the wall over there, and it just makes you feel good. I don't know about y'all, but I love when I get a piece of snail mail. It's a really great way of continuing that conversation with the college representative. And that is for a different presentation. So that's basically all I've got on the interview for today. I'm going to go through some questions now, and if you want to shoot those questions, make sure you go to the Q&A, and I'll go through them one by one. Let's try and keep it on the idea of the interview itself. But if you have questions about the college application process in general, I'm very open to talking about that. So my first question here is, are interviews more important this year if I can't visit campus? And if I'm applying early, is it helpful to have an interview after I apply, or is it too late? Okay, so the first question is, is it more important to have an interview? That's going to depend on the institution. I think it might be more, let me put it this way. One of the best things that you can do to understand the context of the school, what it feels like to engage with people, is to visit a campus. And so it would be extra beneficial for you to try and supplement that feeling of walking around campus and engaging with people by attending as many different online events and engaging with people on a one-on-one level as much as possible. Will it help, on our side? Maybe, maybe not. But will it help you glean what it means to be on the campus and engaging with people? I think so. And then as far as applying, if I'm applying early, is it helpful to have an interview after I apply, or is it too late? Again, it's going to depend on the institution itself. At Reed, it's not going to matter either way. I think when you interview after you apply, totally great. We celebrate that. Just make sure that you're doing it relatively quickly after you apply, so we can put those two elements together as quick as possible. If you do that, then there's a chance that someone has read your application already, and then will gain additional context afterwards from reading your interview. So either way, if I was to interview you beforehand, I'm going to read it. I'm going to have that picture of who you are in my head. I'm going to have some context as to like how you learn and what kinds of things you're prioritizing. And then I'm going to read your application through that lens. It's kind of just the opposite when you apply or when you interview afterwards. So think about how you want to strategically place that interview. I have a question here. It says, how do you brag without bragging? And how important is it to show designated interest in a school? Well, as far as bragging without bragging goes, I don't think it's your job to brag. It's my job to brag on your behalf. Rather, what we are looking for is honesty and excitement. I don't need you to, wax poetic about how amazing you are, because if you are in front of me and you are speaking genuinely about who you are and what your passions are, I will be able to do that for you. Okay. Much more important than bragging about yourself is coming with an honest diplomatic lens. Okay. As far as how important it is to show demonstrated interest in a school, depends on the school, and it depends on whether they even look at that in the first place. But my take is it never hurts to start a conversation with a college official, because what I want you to walk away with is the idea that when you send in your application, it doesn't go to some big computer and like scan your grades and be like, 4 years of football or whatever. It goes to a person. I'm going to be the one reading your application. And so, think about how you are going to convey yourself to a human or several humans, because most likely several people will be reading your application. I see another question here about receiving this presentation in my email. That is going to be a question for Annabelle and the CTCL specifically. I'm not quite sure how this will be handled as far as distributing this later. I have another question here. Do colleges make the interview with you, or should you make an interview with them? Oh, that's a good question. I think most of the time you make the interview with them. It's pretty rare that a college will be reaching out to you and saying, hey, here's a time, does this work for you? That said, one of the best first steps here is doing a little research on who your regional counselor or official is, reaching out to them and saying, hey, what are next steps here? How can I set up an interview? Is that your job? Or just say, hey, I'm interested in this place. What do you want from me? And they'll be very happy to oblige. Another question here. Why do some schools not have interviews while others offer them? That's a good question. I think it depends on a lot of things. It depends on whether schools are prioritizing that kind of interaction, if they think they can glean more from an interview or not. It depends on how they are reading the applications in the first place. Maybe it depends on infrastructure, but a lot of that is speculation on my part. I know that we have interviews because we want to make sure that we are getting as many different sides of the student as possible. And we found that an application alone is fine, but it is not the whole you most of the time. And we want to make sure that we are gleaming the whole you. I have another question here. It says, does it make them feel like you're asking them questions? Does it make them feel like you're asking them questions because you're afraid of answering their question? Let me see. Oh, I see what you mean. So I don't think an interviewer would feel like you are like deflecting or afraid of answering a question if you are also asking questions. Maybe there are interviewers out there like that. But the main thing is I want you to feel like this is a conversation. Because if you go in feeling like it's a conversation, you're going to more naturally be able to discuss who you are and who you interact with. Because we're not just trying to get answers from you. We're also trying to figure out, what would it be like to eat lunch with this person? What would it be like to, have conference-based classroom with this student? Are they going to, bogart the mic the whole time? Are they going to, be communicative? Are they going to be collaborative? These are all things that we can get simply from having that kind of conversation. I also want to make sure that you know that we're not looking just for 100% extroverts, proactive, like I've got this, I can talk about myself all day. It takes all kinds. If you are more pensive and thoughtful and uh, you like to take long pauses to make sure you're thinking about the best ways to answer those things, those are some of my favorite interviews. Anecdotally, one of my favorite interviews I've ever had was a student who was, at first, I thought that they were just having a really hard time answering my questions, because I would ask a question and they'd be very quiet for a very long time. And then they would answer quite plainly. But by the end of the interview, I walked away saying, this is a student who cuts all of the fat off of their answers, who thinks genuinely and deeply about how to answer something before they open their mouth and start talking. And each of their answers was so clean and so perfectly answered that I learned a lot about them. So don't think that you have to just run your mouth or, just be something that you're not. However you are in a classroom or with your friends or with your professors or teachers, that's how I want to see this conversation go. I see for interviews, should you bring a resume with you? For an interview with an art school, should you bring a portfolio of your work too? That is going to depend on the school. If a school requires a resume or a portfolio, they will let you know. If they don't, it never hurts to bring it. I love having more information on the student, but I will say this: a resume is fine in the moment, but it's going to essentially follow the same course as your application, right? And so it's unless there's something that you are bringing me that is going to bring me additional context and additional information as to who you are in and out of the classroom, then it's simply just another step. Then you're basically just printing out a piece of your application. So think about what it is that you want to bring with you, and if it's going to just be replicated down the line. I have another question here. It says, what is the difference between having an interview and asking questions about the school and program in email or in a meeting? Well, I think the difference between having an interview and just asking questions over email is kind of what I was speaking to before. I'm not going to glean a lot of what it's like to physically or virtually be in a room with you through email. Email is a great way of answering questions plainly. If you are a great email writer, that's awesome. And I'd love to see that. But there's so much more to human interaction than the one page, than the single lens of text. As far as in a meeting goes, meeting is another great place to converse with people and bounce ideas off of each other. But think about the kinds of conversations you have in a group setting versus a one-on-one setting. If you are in a one-on-one setting, it's the format is going to change fundamentally. The kinds of ideas that you're bouncing off at each other are going to be different because of the nature of the room. So am I saying that you shouldn't email with people at the school or you shouldn't have these group meetings? Absolutely not. I think especially now that everything is in this strange new world of being online, the best way to make sure that you are fully present and gleaming as much as you can about these different institutions is to try many different kinds of mediums. The more you are showing up for these different schools, the more you are going to understand what it means to be at this institution. I think that it's much more important than what we can glean from who you are. You should be able to walk away with a deeper knowledge of the institution by picking different, nuggets of what it means to be at that school through different formats: interviews, emails, group meetings, panels, one-on-ones with students, whatever it is that the school is offering. Think about what it is you can glean from those different settings, and how that is going to make it easier for you to make an informed decision. Those are all the questions I have. I'll give it a second to see if there are any other questions rolling in. I used to be a teacher, so I can wait if I need to. Well, I'm getting some thank yous. Thank you so much for being here. I want to thank everyone for being here, for your fantastic questions, for your attentiveness. I assume you're attentive. I mean, I can't see or hear you. But I want you to walk away with some action steps. I want you to take your list of schools, go to their website, see if they offer interviews, and then figure out who your regional counselor is and shoot them an email and say, hey, what's my next step here? Because that will help you figure out how to move forward. But I want to thank you all for being here, and please stay safe. Please stay healthy. Look at your hands, wash them, and then just wash them one more time just in case. But I'm really excited to be reading some applications of y'all very, very soon. So thank you very much.
Great, thank you, Tim. We appreciate your time and the insightful information you provide.
Thank you.
Also, I just want to thank everybody for joining this session. And when you close your window, there will be a link to a very quick 4-question survey. We'd appreciate any feedback you can provide. Also, this was just one of the many sessions being hosted, so be sure to sign up for additional sessions. And also in about a week, you'll be able to find this session recordings as well as any other session recordings that you've attended. So again, thank you for your time. Have a great day.